there's a Victorian house in Providence, Rhode Island that still looks remarkably like it did in 1865. Remaining in the same family for nearly 114 years before becoming a museum, the Lippitt House offers us a rare opportunity to step inside a true New England Victorian time capsule and experience what everyday life might have felt like for a wealthy family when Providence was thriving as an industrial powerhouse. Containing much of its original furnishings, decorative finishes, and richly preserved wall and ceiling art, this home feels like stepping into a pivotal interior design moment, when architects and craftspeople were pushing boundaries and embracing more ambitious, expressive interiors. In this video, we're stepping inside the Lippitt House Museum in Providence, Rhode Island, to learn about the family who lived here, explore the craftsmanship and richly layered decorative details, and discover how this High Victorian New England home allows history, design, and community to intersect all under the same roof. Hi, I'm Allie, and welcome back to Fab Little Dish, where we celebrate the love for vintage home. If you love historic interiors and the stories they tell, then give this video a quick thumbs up. It really helps places like this get in front of new faces and helps keep their stories alive. Now come with me to Providence, Rhode Island. Henry Lippitt was a Providence native and heir to one of Rhode Island's largest textile manufacturers. His grandfather, Charles Lippitt, started the Lippitt Manufacturing Company in 1807. Henry takes on what his grandfather started and expands the business to 6 textile mills across Rhode Island and Connecticut. As Henry's fortune grew, he invested in banks, railroads, insurance companies, steamship lines, and mines. By 1866, he was worth over $500,000, an astonishing amount today. Henry married Mary Ann Balch, daughter of a Providence apothecary, on the 16th of December in 1845. Together they had 11 children, but unfortunately only 6 survived to adulthood. Mary Ann was a driven businesswoman on her own. She owned and managed rental properties across Providence. It was also her responsibility to supervise the servants and make sure the house operated efficiently. Henry and Mary's oldest daughter, Jeannie, unfortunately became deaf at just 4 years old after contracting yellow fever. At the time, options for deaf education were extremely limited. Many people believed deaf children were incapable of receiving a formal education at all. And for families who could afford schooling, children were often sent away to Boston or Hartford, Connecticut, separated from their families for years, as they worked on their speech and communication skills. For Mary Ann, sending her daughter away simply wasn't an option. So instead, she did something remarkable. She began developing her own methods to teach her daughter how to read lips. Her daughter's communication flourished. She became fluent in speech and lip reading, and together, the mother and daughter duo became influential advocates for what would be known at the time as oralism, a method of deaf education focused on spoken language and lip reading, which would go on to shape schools across the country. In 1876, the Lippitt family helped establish what became the Rhode Island School for the Deaf, a public school that meant children in this state no longer had to leave home to receive an education. The school still operates today, and while its philosophy has evolved over time, as it now embraces a bimodal approach, honoring both American Sign Language and spoken English, continuing the legacy of access, education, and advocacy that began right here. Henry Lippitt was elected governor of Rhode Island in 1875 and served 2 one-year terms, which means this house didn't just function as a family residence. For a time, it quietly operated as a governor's mansion, and public service didn't end with just Henry. It became part of the Lippitt legacy. All 3 surviving sons would go on to hold elected office positions. Charles W. Lippitt later became governor himself, Henry F. Lippitt served as a United States Senator, and the youngest, Robert Link Lippitt, served in the Rhode Island General Assembly. But what I find especially interesting is what the daughters did during a time when women didn't have a voice and couldn't even vote. Abby became widely known for her great athleticism during a time when that wasn't widely encouraged for women. Jeannie continued advocating for deaf education alongside her mother, and Mary Lippitt Steedman became a civic force in her own right, founding the Providence chapter of the American Red Cross at the start of the First World War, becoming the first woman to represent Rhode Island on the Republican National Committee, and publicly supporting the Equal Rights Amendment in 1923. So even though the men of this home held elected office, The women of the house were also finding ways to help shape their community around them for generations to come. And like most large New England homes during this time, the Lippitt household relied on domestic staff to operate smoothly. In the late 19th century, many domestic servants in Providence were Irish immigrants, women and men who had arrived in America seeking opportunity after the Great Potato Famine in Ireland. Domestic service was one of the few professions open to working-class immigrant women at the time. These positions provided steady wages, housing, and food, but they also meant long hours, strict hierarchies, and living within someone else's household structure. At Lippitt House, servants would have worked as cooks, maids, laundresses, coachmen, ensuring the home ran efficiently while remaining largely invisible to guests. The Lippitt House was built between 1863 and 1865 in the Renaissance Revival style, constructed in brick and brownstone at a time when Providence was booming as a manufacturing center of New England. The architect was Alpheus C. Morse, a prominent Providence designer known for embracing European-inspired architectural styles and bringing them into an American urban context. And you can really feel that here. The symmetry, the heavy cornices, the arched windows, it's very much inspired by Italian Renaissance palazzos. The house rises 3 stories and contains 30 rooms, but what makes it especially significant for its time is the innovation within. This home had central heating, indoor plumbing, and an early hot air furnace system, technological advancements that were still considered modern luxuries during the 1860s. The house was so outstanding, it was included on a survey of historic American buildings. At the time, in letters, the home is described as the most stately home in Providence. Since it went directly from a private home to a museum, the interiors look just as they did when the Lippitts lived here. Now let's step inside. If you were visiting this house in the late 19th century, you would have been greeted at the front door by the Lippitt House footman, Edward Bennett, and he would have escorted you right here into the main hall. This was the Lippitt stage, a space designed to impress from the moment a guest crossed the threshold, and you can feel that intention immediately. Every surface is treated, every detail is deliberate, and we even have a portrait of Henry Lippitt himself facing towards us, welcoming us into his home. The parquet floors alone are a work of art. Intricate geometric inlays, Greek key meander patterns wrapping the perimeter, and that striking medallion right at the center. It draws your eye inward before lifting it upward. Hand-painted wall and ceiling finishes cover nearly every inch of the surfaces in here. We see elaborate stenciling, rich saturated colors, deeply carved woodwork, and rich wood-painted paneling that almost glows under this light. And look above at these chandeliers. You'll see stags on them, which you'll also see repeated throughout the house. These often symbolize strength, provision, guardianship, a subtle nod to Henry's role as patriarch of the home and the provider. And then there's this hall stand, custom made and ornately carved and very commanding in its presence, costing Henry Lippitt $600 at the time, which was more than 2.5 times the annual wages of one of the mill operators working in his textile factories. And that detail matters, because while this hall is dazzling, it's also a physical reminder of the vast economic divide between industrial wealth and industrial labor in the 19th century. And here is the reception room. After the dramatic masculine weight of the hall, we step into something noticeably softer and more feminine. The reception room was Mary Ann Lippitt's domain. You can feel that in the palette alone. Blush-toned walls, delicate stenciling, intricate painted borders, even the ceiling feels layered and ornamental. Very Victorian, where every inch is decorated. The paintings in this room all feature women, setting an intentional tone in here. In the center of this room is a gasolier powered by gas, an example of new technology that was starting to emerge at the time. This was the primary space where Mary Ann entertained her female guests. Rooms like this is where influence quietly happened. This is where reputations were maintained, philanthropic ideas were discussed, where education reform, charitable work, civic initiatives, all the causes she cared deeply about. And as we enter the library, we feel the shift right back to a masculine vibe in here. It's darker than the reception room, heavier wood painted finishes, deeper tones, yet more vibrant in nature. This was a room meant to impress, but also to conduct business. Providence in the mid-19th century was thriving on textile manufacturing, and Henry Lippitt was at the center of that industry. As both a major mill owner and later as governor of Rhode Island, it's easy to imagine conversations in this room, blending commerce and politics, industry and influence unfolding beneath these very walls. The walls and ceiling in this room are also extraordinary. If you look closely, much of what you're looking at isn't carved wood at all. It's painted to look like it. Throughout this house, decorative finishes were carefully designed to imitate inlaid wood, carved stone, even leather. And the brushstrokes you're looking at date back to 1865. They're original to when the house was built. It allowed the home to really bring together different types of new, expensive materials and European influences without importing every surface. Victorian interiors in this period were fearless. They borrowed from Moorish patterns, Renaissance revival forms, classical motifs, and they blend all of that into one space. And we can see that happening right here. You can see the eclecticism clearly in the stenciled walls and all throughout the structured ceiling grids. The built-in cabinetry is beautiful and complements one another. We have another gorgeous gasolier in here, another technological advancement for the time. Here we see the stag imagery featured on it, a motif which you will see throughout this house, especially in the dining room, which is coming up next. Lippitt House dining room has been described as the best surviving example of a mid-1800s American dining room. It epitomizes the 19th century Victorian aesthetic with highly decorated, overscale furniture featuring hunt and harvest imagery throughout. The dining room is unapologetically masculine. Carved stags, hunt imagery, harvest motifs, fruit and game worked into the woodwork itself and into the furniture. The scale of the furniture feels oversized, solid, commanding, which of course is intentional. This is where Henry Lippitt put his authority on display for all of his guests to see. In Victorian symbolism, the hunt represented provision, strength, and the ability of the head of the household to provide for his family. The stag heads, the carved animals, the harvest motifs all reinforce that message, that he was the provider. When fully extended, this table could seat up to 14 guests. Dinner was served à la Russe, the Russian style, meaning each course was brought out sequentially. Guests would select their preferred cut of meat as it was presented, and a formal dinner here could stretch across 6 or more courses, with each course taking around 20 minutes. The dining room is a space where servants regularly interacted with the rest of the family. The cook, Mary Donovan, prepared meals not only for the family here, but for the servants as well, 3 times a day. In 1875 alone, the household was feeding at least 12 people daily, plus guests. In this room specifically, the footman, Edward Bennett, would have overseen service. He handled the more strenuous invisible tasks, presenting dishes, serving wine, assisting guests in selecting cuts of meat. The waiter, William Mason, cleared plates, refilled glasses, moved between sideboard and table to keep everything seamless. The green and white china here belonged to Mary Ann Lippitt herself. Her initials are right here on the pieces of the set. And just beyond this folding screen is the butler's pantry. It's a reminder that while this room celebrates abundance, it depended entirely on the people working just right out of sight. When the house was first built, this wasn't a music room at all. It was a billiards room, a masculine, entertaining space where Henry Lippitt would have gathered with his male guests, talked business, played cards, and socialized. But by 1879, the needs of the family had shifted. Henry and Mary Ann redecorated this room. So the house evolved as the family's needs changed. Music was deeply important to Mary Ann. She played piano regularly, and from her journals, we know that she attended concerts often. So this room becomes something softer, more expressive, something a little more personal. A place for music, for gathering, for performance within the home. In the 19th century, music was also a form of education, especially for women. Being able to play piano wasn't just a hobby. This is where the guests would have gathered, the girls would have practiced piano, and where the family would have spent a lot of time together. And yet, traces of the room's earlier life still remain. There's still a small porcelain sink tucked into the side of the room to the right here, left over for when this space functioned as a bar and billiard room. Typically, billiard rooms often included washstands or small sinks for gentlemen to be able to rinse their hands in between games. There's also a bathroom in this room. At a time when American homes still relied on outhouses, this home had indoor plumbing and bathrooms on every single floor. That level of modernization in the 1860s was very innovative for its time. It speaks to the wealth the family had, but it also shows how forward-thinking they were in their design choices. This is the drawing room, the largest and most formal space in the house. Today, this space is used for meetings and other events, but at one time, this would have been a very lively space, filled with guests and entertainment. The design leans heavily into the French style, with its tall mirrors, delicate plasterwork and molding, damask silk wall paneling, and elegant symmetry throughout. Mary Ann loved games. She was known for hosting late-night card parties here. This was a lively home, and even though there isn't a lot of furniture in here, you can still feel this really was the center of all of the social events in the home. Like many large social rooms in Victorian homes, this space had multiple purposes. When Henry Lippitt died, he was laid out right here. There was a line wrapping all the way around the building and all the way down the corner for people to come and visit Henry and pay their respects. Their daughter was married in this very room. Later, a granddaughter held her debutante ball here. The space became a backdrop for the family's milestones. And we have another gorgeous chandelier here. This one also has that same Greek key meander pattern throughout that we saw in the Great Hall. Such a great design tactic as a way of creating cohesion from one room to the next. And over here on the table, we see some personal objects that the museum has collected that begin to humanize the space. There are examples of textiles, a quiet little nod to the industry that built this house. There's also a small slate, which was one of the hands-on teaching methods that Marianne used while educating her daughter at home. Simple tools, some postcards from travels, really a table to paint a picture of the family who once lived here and show their more personal and relatable side. As we head upstairs, the house shifts. The staircase itself is heavy carved oak. It's sturdy, intentional, and very grounding. And then there's this stained glass window right here on the landing. The colors are rich and bold, deep reds, rich greens, saturated blues, with delicate leaves and birds woven throughout. As the sunlight passes through, it filters jewel-toned light across the stair hall, casting soft colors onto the walls and woodwork. It's one of those details that changes the entire mood and look of the space, depending on the time of day. Even the wall finishes are painted to imitate leather and wood surfaces. This house is constantly blurring the line between material and illusion, which only makes it more of a Victorian masterpiece. As soon as we reach upstairs, the tone immediately feels softer. The rooms below are bold and theatrical, but up here, it's lighter, more restrained. The ceilings aren't as aggressively decorated, but they're still beautiful. Carefully painted patterns layered with subtle colors. It feels private up here, quiet, but still elegant. I love the details, like this small alcove over here, with the L carved right above it. It's understated, but it feels like a little personal nook. I like to imagine what the family did with spaces like these when I see them. It looks like a good hide-and-go-seek place to me. This is also where one of the most beloved objects in the house lives, the dollhouse. And I love this piece because it feels so incredibly personal. It gives us a glimpse into the Lippitt children's world, what captured their imagination, what everyday life might have looked like through their eyes. This dollhouse actually predates the Lippitt house itself. It belonged to the children before the family even built this home, so they took it from their previous residence to this one. If you look closely, you can tell that some of the tiny furnishings were handmade by the children. This little bed, the curtains are tacked directly into the wall, and other spaces have little commercially produced furniture pieces for the dollhouse. It's this mix of imagination, creativity, craft, and early consumer culture all in one little dollhouse. Up here, I can just see the children running through these halls as their parents entertain downstairs, with this dollhouse being the focal point. And And this is May Lippitt's bedroom, and it's the only bedroom we're able to step inside during the tour. Most of the rest of the upper floor today is used behind the scenes for museum operations, storage, and staff workspaces. But this room was carefully designed to recreate May's actual bedroom when she lived here, when she was 35 years old. Mary May Lippitt Steedman founded the Providence chapter of the American Red Cross at the beginning of the First World War. She later became the first woman to represent Rhode Island on the Republican National Committee, and when the Equal Rights Amendment was introduced in 1923, she publicly took a supportive stance. She was widowed young, raised her son on her own, and still was able to fully participate in public life and in her community. The charcoal painting of her father, Henry Lippitt, and the watercolor French Girl with Dog were rehung in their exact original locations. May's room reflects her life, dignified, thoughtful, but not overly ornate. As we leave the Lippitt house, what stays with me is this sense of conviction within these walls. This was a family deeply rooted in Providence, in its industry, its politics, its reform movements, and you can feel the family's passion and determination layered throughout the entire home. And as far as the design inspiration here, I'm beyond impressed. The original stenciling, the painted faux finishes, the carved woodwork, the symbolism, and the motifs carried throughout, the entire home is a design feast for the eyes. Every surface feels considered, every room feels intentional. But what makes this house even more powerful is its mission today. This is an active space that continues to bring people together, just as it did generations ago, creating connection through art, history, and community. I hope you enjoyed stepping inside the Lippitt House Museum in Providence, Rhode Island with me today. If you love exploring historic homes and learning about the stories layered between the walls, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up. It truly helps more people discover places like this and helps keep their stories being shared. Until the next one, my friends, keep enjoying the beauty of vintage home. Au revoir.